Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous. That's a 20-year-old 2004 Honda Element. I've actually always wanted to drive one of these, and today is my lucky day, and I get to share it with you guys. This came out before the Nissan Cube, before the Kia Soul, and even before the FJ Cruiser like I used to own. Honda was kind of a trendsetter back in the day, building boxy little SUVs. Well, I guess they only built one generation of this, and today I'm really excited to share it with you guys. So if you get anything out of this video, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, let's get right into this quick impromptu review of a 230,000 mile Honda Element. To decide, is it out of its element, just being on the road still? Or does this thing have a lot of life in it? Does it really represent the old school naturally aspirated Honda 4-cylinder name quite well? There's a lot to look at. There's a lot to talk about as we go through this vehicle. So let's dive right in. Under the hood, we have the bulletproof 2.4 liter VTEC 4-cylinder engine, makes 166 horsepower, a similar amount of torque. VTEC is not something that every naturally aspirated Honda has these days. Back in the day, that stood for very tall engine coolant, which you can see right there. Okay, maybe not very tall engine coolant, but it was related to the valve timing. When you really rev these out, it was almost like a settled turbo, like a couple pounds of PSI kicked in, and you actually pulled a little bit harder. This is the same engine that my mom has in her CRV. It's also about the same age, 20 years old, still kicking really good. And I'm not surprised. They could have put some weather stripping around this. That would have cost maybe $8, and it would have kept the under the hood experience a much nicer one, much cleaner, because it is very filthy. But 20 years ago, without all the electronic controls that you have today, there's a lot of room. Even though this is transversely mounted, even though the 4 cylinders are like this, you have the serpentine belt right there. Easy to get to. You have the mount that holds the engine to the chassis, one of them anyways, and honestly everything else is pretty easy to identify. Just clean this up, maybe do a steam cleaning, wipe off some of the corrosion on the battery and get that thing replaced, and honestly this thing might be ready for a couple 100,000 more miles. But probably one of the most noticeable things on this one is just how the aging of the cladding has taken place. Look at all that cladding. It's literally the majority of the front end of this. It probably could have used some cleaner. Maybe this has spent a lot of the time in the sun over its lifetime, but it's kind of hard to tell because this sun-blazed paint with the pinstriping, actually overall, other than some clear coat scratches, you still have a lot of metallic flake. It still actually looks pretty good. There's some cracking in the windshield, the A-pillars, a little bit damaged. A lot of the plastics, though, you could probably refresh, but it's interesting to see how these have aged compared to the paint. Side mirrors really big, pinstriping throughout the entirety of this vehicle. And honestly, this is a subcompact crossover SUV. This is not usually very big. These typically are about 14.5 feet long. This is like a Crosstrek or a CX-90, but this one has so much more room than any of those vehicles. And there's a lot that I want to show you. So let's get into the interior and show you just how well it's aged, or maybe how well it hasn't. We're going to find out. The door panel is huge. Look at how big this old school Honda Element opens its doors, probably like 80 degrees. So the door panel is huge. Because this doesn't have the traditional back seat, it has the suicide door, kind of like my FJ Cruiser had, which I personally think is pretty cool. Huge door panel, big speaker, probably doesn't sound very good in today's time. And then actually a pretty high entry threshold. This thing actually has some pretty decent ground clearance, even though some of that's taken up from the structures underneath. But you actually have to step pretty high to get into this little vehicle. Cloth seat, manual controls. No sunroof on the front half of the vehicle. You're going to have to wait for the back half to see that interesting thing. But you have all-weather mats. You have the hood release. You have either sometimes a fuse box, sometimes storage. It looks like they left some money in this one. And then you have cruise control. You have what looks like someone tampering with this. So you have a fuse box right there. You can see some of that. I wonder if someone tried to steal this at one point, or what had happened. Maybe the knee airbag went off if this had a knee airbag. That's maybe a more likely option. But this thing, like a lot of old school Hondas from the time, like the Odyssey, like the CRV, has so much carrying capacity. You have a huge storage pocket right here. You don't have any pull-out storage here, but you have a speaker, which I find interesting. Also, the acoustics in here are kind of interesting with all the glass and all the design squareness of this. You have more storage at 12 volt. A locking glove box with some more stuff, some light bulbs in here. Old HVAC controls, CD player, ventilation, really good forward-facing visibility, and my favorite feature of all, the backup camera. Yeah, check that out. Pretty good visibility, and you have really good insight to the dimensions of this vehicle, kind of like a minivan. Kind of like the new Volkswagen ID Buzz. And then there's your sunroof up top, but the seats with their fold-down captain chair-like armrests. Kind of interesting. This one at the Twin Falls Subaru, $4,900. And probably $900 of that is the Yakima roof rails, and you have the storage bin up top. But as if you needed more storage, because when you have the back seats in here, you'd have 25 cubic feet behind the second row. Without the seats, or with the seats folded down, you apparently have about 75. Without the seats, only God knows how much you have back here. It honestly feels like it's probably about 100 square feet. And this is seriously very interesting. You have cup holders if there's people up here. If not, that could be a dog bowl. If you have your pets back here, you can see the seats have obviously been removed. I wonder if there's anything under here. Nope, just looks like overlaying mats. But seriously, look at all that. It looks like you can even pop that open. So if you are going to car camp in the back of your Element, you're going to have some natural light. You're going to watch the sun. You can also open the side mirrors. There's even a handle right there for the backseat passengers. Of course, there's seat belts. There's some storage on the side, some cup holders. Very interesting place to be. Let's come around to the back. I'll be honest, guys, this looked so much different than I thought it was going to when I saw it available to borrow. All right, let's see. How do we do this? It must be locked. You must need the key. I do have the physical key. This also has keyless entry. Let's see if these still work. I'm kind of curious. Ooh, it does. All right, let's see if that unlocks this too. Ooh, kind of like a Jeep Wrangler. This is the Honda Element. And it has features like a Jeep Wrangler. Very cool. My FJ Cruiser also did that, but it was actually just the glass that would pop open, not the whole top half of the hatch. Kind of interesting. You have some bag clips. Just so much storage, so much room for activities back here. This is really impressive, really cool. You can have a light, probably an incandescent right there. And honestly, the factory tint on this has held up pretty well. I wonder though, do we have a spare tire? Ooh, probably the most crusty, cobweb-filled spare tire that I've ever seen. But hey, it is there on top of the sheet metal. That's very cool. You can have a 12 volt down there. And then how does this open? Let's see. No, that's a light. And that's a light. Does this not open? I'm trying to look for a hinge. Do you guys see a hinge on camera? Am I completely blind? I might be. Anyways, that's pretty interesting. This should be pretty easy to close. And yep, it is. Honestly, guys, I thought that this was a very good looking example of it. I don't know what happened to the back seats. I don't know what happened to the dashboard. But for $4,900, you put a few grand of TLC into this, I think you could have a pretty good Honda vehicle. Check out how it drives, even if it's a slow little drive through the parking lot. And with 230,000 miles and a check engine light on with maintenance required, I'm not going to do my typical driving review and 0 to 60, but just driving this around the parking lot, driving this around for a couple minutes locally, basically off of idle. It is pretty interesting. Without all the interior, with all the glass that this has, the echoing, the audio is kind of interesting how the sound waves reverberate all around. With all that extra cargo capacity back here, these big windows, I just feel like I'm driving a van, but I'm driving a Honda Element. Basically, I'm driving a mini-sized H2 Hummer like what's right over there. And this is a really interesting experience. But this has the 2.4 liter VTEC little engine. These are pretty neat. These are pretty cool. And honestly, I've wanted to drive one of these for a long time, even since I used to have my FJ Cruiser about 10 years ago. This is a very unique vehicle. I highly recommend you guys hop into the driver's seat of one of these at some point. So yeah, probably a couple grand to get this thing up and running how it should. It's been idling here for 20 minutes now, and honestly, I think it idles and sounds pretty darn decent. So what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Do you like the Honda Element? Have you guys ever been up close and personal with one of these before? Do you like it? Do you like this old school Honda design? Big, basic, halogen headlights. Probably should have some mesh protection on front of the radiator right there. That's just my thought. You could always add some aftermarket fog lights, add an LED light bar, maybe behind the grille, upper or lower. Honestly, sky's the limit. This could be a pretty cool vehicle, a pretty fun one to explore and to drive. But comment below your thoughts and opinions. Like this video if you got anything out of it. And I wish you guys the best. I hope you take care. Until next time. See ya.